I could tomorrow stop, or today, even better, stop everything having to do with Spain, all business having to do with Spain. I have the right to stop it. Uh, Embargoes, do anything I want with it. And we may do that with Spain.
Spain just told the United States of America no on military airstrip access. And Trump's response here? I could stop all business with Spain tomorrow. Now, here's why this is different. I live in Spain half the year. My wife is Andalusian. My son is Andalusian, meaning the Mediterranean part of Spain, the southern Spain, Costa del Sol. This isn't abstract geopolitics to me. Like, this is alliance tension that could get real fast.
We have the right to stop all business having to do with a certain country. If a certain country is not treating us well, the president, without going to Congress, has the right to stop. Sort of interesting. I have the right to stop, but under that one law, I didn't have the right to charge them. So I have the right to license them, but I don't have the right to charge, which is frankly ridiculous. But the right was given to us by the Supreme Court. And we have the right, as an example, we talked about Spain. I could tomorrow stop, or today, even better, stop everything having to do with Spain, all business having to do with Spain. I have the right to stop it. Embargoes, do anything I want with it. And we may do that with Spain.
Sir, I agree. The Supreme Court reaffirmed your ability to implement an embargo. And as we've talked, from your first term, the Section 301s and the 232s have withheld more than 4,000 lawsuits. And USTR and Commerce are going to begin investigations, and we'll move forward with those.
And we've instituted a 15% tariff on everybody, as you know. We've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars in our country because of tariffs. So we've taken in all of this money, hundreds of billions of dollars, and honestly, it's made us very rich as a country.
Are you satisfied with today?
Oh, I think Spain's terrible what they've done. No, I do. They're the only country that won't pay the full up. They want to stay at 2%. I think it's terrible. And, they're doing very well. The economy is very well. And that economy could be blown right out of the water with something bad happening. Spain is the only country that... Are you from Spain?
Yeah.
Good. Congratulations. You're the only country that is not paying. I don't know what the problem is. I think it's too bad. So we'll make it up. You know what we're going to do? We're negotiating with Spain on a trade deal. We're going to make them pay twice as much. And I'm actually serious about that. We're going to make Spain... I like Spain. I have so many people from Spain that it's a great place and they're great people. But Spain is the only country out of all of the countries that refuses to pay. And, so they want a little bit of a free ride. But they'll have to pay it back to us on trade because I'm not going to let that happen. It's unfair. I'm going to negotiate directly with Spain. I'm going to do it myself. They're going to pay. They'll pay more money this way. You should tell them to go back and pay. You're a reporter. Tell them to go back. They ought to join all of those countries that are paying 5%. Spain's going to be just about the only one that's not. They were the most hostile toward doing it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I can only give you my anecdotal evidence, specifically living, again, in the south of Spain. There's a very anti-American sentiment that kind of floats around. They look at us, for the most part, as like, imperialist and all these other things. And it is very much so a socialist, haven there. Okay, so when they see people like Trump and people who really like the idea of working and building things for themselves, I'm not sure that's the response, let's say, that they are interested in. Understand, my first apartment in the south of Spain was roughly 400 to 600 euros. And the backyard was the Mediterranean Sea. Understand this for a second, okay? They don't really care about, say, the same things that we care about in the United States of America. When they start seeing gunboat diplomacy or any type of pressure being put on another place, they themselves are like, what do you mean? Right? Why can't we just love everyone? Flower children of the 70s. That's basically what represents a good amount of the region, right? Things are obviously different depending on where you are. Understand, this is the same government that just allowed a gigantic quantity of illegal Pakistanis to have legal residency just by going to the embassy.
Spain has refused to allow U.S. military bases on its soil to be used in the ongoing American and Israeli campaign against Iran, and the aircraft have already started leaving. Flight tracking website Flight Radar 24 showed 15 U.S. aircraft departing from the Rota and Moron military bases in southern Spain since the weekend strikes began. The clearest articulation of Spain's position came from Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez himself. Sánchez made clear Spain's position was not simply about this conflict, but about the framework of international law itself.
Today, more than ever, it is absolutely essential to remember that one can be opposed to an odious regime, as is the case for the whole of Spanish society, such as the Iranian regime, and at the very same time be against an unjustified military intervention, which is dangerous and outside of international law. One must oppose a war initiated without authorization from the US Congress, from the United Nations Security Council, and as I've said, one that violates international law. That there is always room for a negotiated solution rather than allowing oneself to be swept away by the devastation of weapons as the only possible way out. Therefore, I would like once again, as we have done from the beginning, to call for an immediate de-escalation for full respect for international law in all the conflicts that we are unfortunately suffering, and the urgency of resuming dialogue as soon as possible. That is where Spain will be, and that is where I believe the entire European Union should be.
Let's separate emotion from structure. Spain hosts major U.S. military facilities, and these are not just symbolic. They matter strategically. But those bases are on Spanish soil, which means Spain legally retains authority over how they're being used. But this is the collision point here. The U.S. sees operational freedom, and Spain sees sovereign control. This is kind of where we're kind of butting heads right now, but we need to now immediately get into the idea of NATO. Trump has been pushing hard for higher defense spending, up to 5%. I think Spain right now is paying 2.7%. And they don't even pay that. So to Trump's base, this is how this looks. It just looks like this here, guys. We defend you, you underpay, and now you block us. That is nothing more than political fuel. So I'm an independent that somewhat moves center right depending on what we're talking about. I believe NATO members specifically should meet the defense obligations. That's the bare minimum, I think, personally here. I also believe sovereign countries retain control over their territories. But the real question here is leverage. And is trade the right tool specifically to use to enforce military compliance? Because once you threaten trade over base access, you're not just pressuring Spain. You're pressuring the entirety of the European Union. And that changes the scale, I think, personally, of this conversation. And Germany definitely needs to be brought up because they're also kind of saying the same thing, right? The only ones that have turned around pretty recently, of course, would be Keir Starmer in the UK. And that's our closest and oldest ally, I'd say, personally. Well, France maybe, but you get what I'm saying. Cutting off trade with Spain isn't really a small move, right? So Spain negotiates trade with the EU. So a Spain-only cutoff would basically become complicated super immediately. It would be immediately complicated. And here's where I get practical in this scenario here. When I'm in southern Spain, I see olive oil producers, exporters, and overall small manufacturers. That's the real economy of Spain. From Washington's perspective, this isn't about olive oil. It's about whether allies, specifically, can obstruct U.S. military logistics during an active operation. And that's the pressure point. This may not even be about Spain. This could be Trump sending a message to all of the NATO countries. If you block operational movement, there will be economic consequences. And that's a power recalibration move. And whether you agree with it or not here, right, it's escalation through leverage. So guys, I care about Spain. I care about the United States of America, but alliances aren't emotional relationships here, guys. They're negotiated power structures. If Spain holds its ground, this becomes a sovereignty test. If Trump escalates, this becomes a trade weapon test. But either way, this is bigger than a runway, guys. This is about how alliances function when pressure hits. And the next 72 hours are basically going to tell us whether this is rhetoric or a real shift.